Hello everybody. So for today's video, I just want to talk to you about my photography workflow and how I edit this particular photos. The reason is because I have a few people who ask me how I did it, and I just want to make a video to show you how what my process is from the beginning to the end. And hopefully this will help some of you out, and I just want to show you what tools I use as well for most of my photos. Alright, anyway, so it's gonna be a very basic editing tutorial, you could call that, but alright, so enough of me talking, let's get to it. So alright, I just finished importing all the images that I took on that day, and what I usually do before I do anything is I go into develop, and I always do the lens correction first, and always enable the profile correction, and also remove the chromatic aberration on that. And usually I do that for the first pictures, and then select every photos that I have on that particular photo, and I usually just sync them and make sure that everything is checked off, and the only thing that is checked is the lens correction. So that way, all the photos, it will apply the profile correction, and it will just be helpful to do it now than later before you forget it. Anyway, so after I do that, what I usually do is go through every single photos that I have, and just basically pick out the one I like. And to save some time, I actually already pick out the two photos that I'm gonna use to blend it together. And what I usually do too is also create another folder, and also I name it photo to edit, but you technically can name it anything you want, and it's just more an organization thing. So anyways, so the first image is that I expose to the highlight, which basically I want to capture the scene without blowing out the highlights, since the sun was directly at it. And for this photo, I actually have a 3-stop graduated filter on it, and it also helped balance out the scene. And after that, I have the second image here, which I took later on after the sunrise. And this one, I time it with the wave, and the reason is because during sunrise time or sunset time, you really don't have much time to capture the scene, because the sun is moving very quickly and the light changes really quickly. So there's really no time for that perfect wave, and the scene is just keep changing. So that's why I took this wave shot later on, and you will use this to combine it later with the first image. So anyway, I'm just gonna show you how I edit these photos. So what I usually do is I always change the profile to Adobe Landscape. This is the default, and I always do this because it's just add on a little saturation. It really doesn't matter what profile you use to begin with. It doesn't matter. You can always do that all yourself. But I just like to do it. And as for white balance, I always depend on the scene. For this, I always leave them as shot, or sometimes I adjust them myself. I always try to adjust according to what I remember during the day. And so on this particular photos, it was very warm during the sunrise, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is right now, and I'm probably gonna change it later. But I don't usually do this in the beginning of the when I'm editing any photos, because I like to do it after. So for exposure wise, for this photos, it's kind of bright in the sky, so I'm gonna use the a tools called graduated filter, and it's almost the same as the physical filter, but this is applying in post. And what I usually do is because the scene is so bright on the top, so I'm gonna apply a little, decrease some of the exposure, not too much, because that will ruin the photo. So I'm just gonna decrease to 0.3, and that will help balance out a little more in the scene. And also I will also I will decrease a little highlight. You don't want to overdo it because it will just look terrible. I usually decrease just enough to, you know, show some details of the sky and the sun. So for this scene, I'm gonna do it. So what I also gonna use another graduated filter on the bottom to brighten up the scene from the bottom by a little bit. So maybe half a stop will do. And this way it'll balance out the whole photos. And then for shadows, I'm just, so you just don't want to overuse the shadow bar because it will bring back a lot of details, but it also causes a lot of noise. So for shadow, I usually just put up to a little bit, just enough to get back some details, and that's pretty much it. And for whites and blacks, what I usually do is I hold down the Alt key, and if I drag that to the right, you will see that there's a black screen on the image. What that basically means is when I drag this to the right, the white part of it is basically telling me that the sun is overblown, and basically you will lose all the details on that part of the image. And that's basically what the white part means. Usually I just increase just enough, and not too much and not too little. And also same thing with the black, instead of increasing it, I decrease them. And also you see instead of the black background, you see the white background now. And if I decrease the black, you will see that the black part, what basically that means is just showing that is the part where it will lose all the details, and it'll just basically black on that area. So you don't want to overly do that either, and just enough to, you know, show just enough to give a contrast to the scene instead of using the contrast tool. That's what I usually like to do. And for textures, this I usually will add them in later on after I blend the photos, probably in Photoshop, just to do it all together. And for the haze, for this photo, I probably say +8, and that looked good to me. And for vibrant, I usually vibrant and saturation, for every photo I always leave it 15 and 5. The reason is because when I apply the landscape profile earlier, it's already add a lot of saturation, and I don't want to overly do it. Maybe 10, not even 15. And this is what I usually have for all my photos. And if you look at the histogram, the scene is still on more of a underexposed size. And I'm just gonna increase a little the global exposure just to balance out the scene. So all right, as you can see too, actually I want to mention this. As you can see, this part right here, it was really dark because it is really dark because when I use the graduated filter when I was shooting this scene, it's kind of darkened out this area a lot. So I'm gonna do some dodge and burning, and just to add a little of the exposure back in, just like this. Yeah, and you see that it will bring back some shadow, some details. You don't want to overly do it, just to like kind of blend in the scene. Yeah, just to blend them back, and yeah, that look good. All right, that's pretty much it for that photos. And once I'm done with that, because this photo is pretty much exactly the same, once I'm done with that, I'm just gonna hit copy, and I'm gonna do check all and click copy. I'm gonna click on these photos, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paste the whole setting into here. And for this, it looked ridiculous because this scenes was actually, as I said earlier, it was taken I think almost half an hour later after the sunrise. So the light was really harsh. So if you use the same setting from this first photos to this, it will obviously, everything is just overly exposed. But maybe, yeah, the exposure might be a little too much. I'm gonna get rid of exposure. So all I really take from this photo is the wave, just this part right here. After that, I'm gonna open these two images up as a layer in Photoshop, and the way I do that is I usually highlight all the image that I want to do that, and then go to edit, and open as layer in Photoshop. And what this will do is just open the two image as two different layer on Photoshop. And I'll show you what to do. Just taking a little time to load. I'm just gonna skip to it. Alright, so it just finished loading, and as you can see, it just opened up two different layers for the two photos. Before I do anything, it's always good practice to create a backup of the two layers before you're doing, so that way if anything happen, you can always come back to it. Alright, so after you create a two copy, what I do is the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna blend in the wave. So before I start doing that, I'm gonna select these two image and I'm gonna go over to edit, and then from there I'm gonna use the auto align layers tools. And what it does is it's gonna auto align the two layers image together and try to match it as close as possible. As you can see, it's just matched up very well automatically with Photoshop. The next step is I'm gonna create a layer mask. I'm gonna add a layer mask onto the first image. And I'm gonna use the brush tools, and I'm gonna increase it a little bigger. All right. And so from here, you can see there's the two color palette here, the white and the black. And if you press the X button on the keyboard, it will switch between white and black. And what it does is, black mean it will basically erase the top layer, which I have a layer as on the top layer, and it will expose the layer on the bottom of that image of the first photos. So basically that's what I want, because I want to erase this wave here and then to expose the second wave, second image of the wave. That's what I wanted to include. And so I'm gonna do that along the sides. You can see if I brush that in on the first image, and that will basically just bring in the wave. And so you gotta be careful not doing too much on, maybe sometimes you can increase the size of the brush. I like the foreground here, so I don't want to overdo it on that part. So you just have to play around with it and just, go very slow and see what look good. Alright, yeah, that looks pretty good. And if you can see, it's just basically, if I'm gonna turn this, hide this layer, you can see it. It's just basically bring in the wave. So after that, the next thing you have to do is you want to flatten up the image, and that's basically what it does. Is it will merge all the image together into one single layer. And and always a good practice, always create a second one again, just to be be safe. All right, so once I create a copy of it, I will go up to filters again, and this time I'll go to Color Effect Pro 4. This is the tools that I use for most of my photos, and I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna show you what filter I use. So this is gonna take a little time, so I'm just gonna skip right to it. Alright, once it's up, once it's up, as you can see on the left hand side here, there's a bunch of category that that all the tools fall under. And the one I use obviously is gonna be in landscape, but you can play around with all the other tools and be creative with it. So the tool that I use the most is the tools filter called Pro Contrast. Earlier in Lightroom, I did not add any contrast or anything. The reason is because I know I'm gonna be using this tool to do it instead. I feel like it does a better job, and I just prefer using this one. Alright, so the first thing I do is I will increase the dynamic contrast, and as you can see, what it does is really like make the image pop out. And for the percentage, I always set around 35 to 40%, and that's usually the sweet spot for me. So you don't want to overdo it at all, because it will just, it'll make the whole image look kind of overly done. So just keep it around, around 40, but it's really up to you. There's no right way of doing things here, and this is just what I like. And for the correct color cast, what this does is almost like a temperature control, and if you slide all the way to the right, as you can see, it kind of make the whole image blue and less warm, and it's almost, so it's almost like a temperature control. So for this image, I kind of like the warm, so I'm just gonna, but it's a little too warm, so I'm just gonna increase it to maybe 5, and that is, I think, pretty good to me. So really, these are the two settings that I really change on this filter, and I'm gonna do before and after. So this is before and this is after. That's usually my first filter that I use, and the second filter that I use is called Sunlight. And before you do that, you have to click on Add Filters and just click on Sunlight after that. If you don't do that, if you don't click on Add Filter, replace the previous one. So as you can see, this kind of add in a little glow to the image, but right now it's applying to the whole image. I really don't like it at all. So there's a thing here that you can do, it's called control point. So what you do is you click on the add button, and what it really does is just focus into a single area. If you click on this little dot here, you can actually show where the control point is, and the white spot is pretty much where the effect will apply to, which is just the water. And this is pretty much, that's really all I wanted to do, because I don't want to apply this to the whole image. So I'm going to click on this again to show the image, and I just want to make this part of the wave glow a little bit, and it just give a very soft glow, and it's very beautiful. And I'm going to do before and after. As you can see, this is before and this is after, and it's still a little too strong here, but usually what I'm going to do is just going to decrease the light string just to make it a little subtle. This is a little bright, so I'm just going to decrease pretty much everything in half. So contrast, maybe I'll go to 20, and I'll leave the saturation alone. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And here, as you can see, I'm going to do before and after again. Just add a very nice glow to the water, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's very subtle. And to compare the whole image from the beginning to before I add all these the two photo in, this is before and this is after. Before and after. Yeah, as you can see, it's very subtle. Nothing too drastic change here. And after that, you just click OK, and that will apply the filter. So it's gonna save the image and create another layers on top of the copy. Alright, so once it's done, so as you can see, you can toggle it on and off, so you can see the difference that the filter make. And this really add a really nice, pop to the image without too much. And sometimes what you can do too, if you overly edit on inside Color Effect Pro, what you can do too is you can decrease the opacity on the first layer, and that way it will basically decrease the effect of the filters. So as you can see, if I decrease all the way to 0, it's basically the second layer image right here. And so usually for this photo, I think maybe a little too much, maybe from go 90 opacity. Yeah, that looked pretty good to me. And so once you're done with that, and you basically select all 3 layers again, and you have to, and I'm gonna flatten the image and just hit OK, discard and again another layer. That's pretty much it for this photo right now. So the only thing left to do is pretty much just clean out the image itself. So as you can see, there's a bunch of dust here. You can see in the corner, and then this, I'm just looking around, see what other thing that I need to fix. But that's pretty much it. So I'm just looking around, see anything is out of place. But yeah, as you can see right here too, earlier I did the auto alignment, and it create a little edge here on the image. So what you can do too, you can just hit the crop tools and just crop it a tiny bit just to cut up that piece. Yeah, just enough, just a little bit. And just look around the image, make sure that nothing is out of place. Yeah, yep, as you can see right here on the top here too, you can see it. So I'm just gonna crop it in the top a little bit. Yeah, it's easy just to zoom in and do it. Yeah, everything looked pretty good. So the next thing is, as I said, I want to remove the dust. So the way I remove the dust is I'm gonna use the spot removal tools, and the trick that I use is if you go into this, just to add on another curve layer on top of the image and drag this all the way down, so it just basically increase the black, and once you do that, you actually can see the dust spot a little more prominent, and it's just easier to see to remove them. And once you do that, just click back on the photos layer and just basically just make the circle big enough, and then just go around the image and just remove it and clean it up. Alright, so once you clean up all the image, all the dust, everything that you want, and then all you have to do is just basically delete that first curve adjustment. Let's bring back the image, and as you can see, everything is, all the dust is replaced. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole image. I mean, this is the way I do it. There's obviously many ways to edit photos, and there's basically, just to be creative and try different thing out and see what work for you and what don't. And I feel like that's the best way to learn, is to just, test things out. And yeah, always go out and don't just always stuck at the computer editing photos as well. Just go out and take photos, and the more you do it, I feel like you get better at it. In the beginning, I have a really hard time trying to edit photos too, and it takes very long to edit even one photos, and it takes a lot of time to learn. But once you get it, it's really straightforward. The best resource I would say is, go on YouTube, and there's plenty talented photographers that share their knowledge, so take advantage of it. So that's it for today's videos, and I hope you find it helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment, and I'll do my best to answer them. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and please hit the like button if you like the videos, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It'll help me out greatly. As always, I'll see you in the next one.